Hi everyone! So, as you have come to guess, we are going to be discussing the Renaissance during this unit. But before we can talk about the Renaissance, we have to talk about the Middle Ages because that came before the Renaissance and they had an impact on the Renaissance. So, I'm going to be reading this passage to you. I need you to make sure that you are paying attention as I am reading and you are following along because you will end up having questions as we go through this passage. So make sure you're paying attention. Alright, so we have the big question. That's something we want to think about as we're reading. How did the growth of trade during the Middle Ages affect the way people lived? How did the growth of trade, so that's saying how did trade becoming so much popular impact the way people lived? Did it make things better for people? Did it make things worse for people? All these things we will consider as we are reading. Chapter 4, Merchants, Markets, and Muds. My dog is trying to get in the camera. She's very needy. Towns in the Middle Ages. It is raining again. You stand in a puddle on the edge of a narrow street. You have just entered town through one of two gates. The gates are the only ways in and out of this walled town. Inside the walls, tiny townhouses stand side by side. As you move through the crowd, you spot rats scurrying about, feeding on discarded trash. Nearby, you hear the varied cries of people selling fruit, vegetable, eggs, and pies. It is market day, and people have set up their stalls in the town square. As you make your way through the muddy streets, you hear the sound of church bells. They ring out to sound the hour and to call people to church. You have just caught a glimpse of a town in Europe during the late Middle Ages. We see a illustration right here. Metalworkers stall in the medieval market. And then we have another illustration right here. And the caption reads, "Streets in medieval towns were often crowded and muddy." In the early part of the Middle Ages, most people lived by the countryside, or in the countryside. Between the years 1000 and 1350 AD, fueled by trade, towns began to grow. So if it's being fueled by trade, that's saying it's growing because of the trade. New jobs emerged, and as a result, more and more people left the countryside to live and work in towns. So if jobs are emerging, that's saying that jobs are being created. And then you see in that little illustration in the top corner, peasants farming in the countryside. With its growth in trade, an increased number of people became involved in commerce or business. So remember, commerce means business. As a result, a class of people called the middle class grew in importance. Merchants and craftsmen were part of the middle class. Towns grew as the middle class created successful businesses and therefore jobs. Some merchants became rich and influential members of town communities. So merchants are going to be people who sell things in the markets. And you see down here, you have a little illustration and it says merchants and artisans sold goods in town markets. To protect their businesses, merchants established guilds in towns throughout Europe. Guilds were organizations made up of merchants. Guilds controlled wages as well as the price and quality of the goods the merchants sold. Not only did merchants thrive, we all know what thrive means. We use that in our normal language. If they're thriving, that means they're doing really well. Not only did merchants thrive, so too did skilled craftsmen, such as carpenters, paper makers, glass makers, and blacksmiths. Skilled craftsmen were also important members of town communities. They made and sold their goods in the towns in which they lived and worked. They, just like merchants, skilled craftsmen protected their business by forming guilds. Only highly skilled craftsmen were invited to join these guilds. Many years of training went into becoming a skilled craftsman. So we have different examples up here of craftsmen. We have the carpenter, so that's someone who is working and building things. We have the tailor, who takes care of the clothes, makes sure that it's fit correctly. The armorer, someone who makes armor. And then the tanner looks like that maybe they are doing something with like an animal hide or something like that. There was a certain pattern to daily life in towns in the Middle Ages. From Monday to Saturday, towns were busy with the hustle and bustle of street vendors, shopkeepers, craftsmen, and market sellers. Pickpockets and purse snatchers were afoot too. We all know what that is, right? That's someone who comes up, steals things out of your pocket. They pick your pocket. Shops opened as early as 6 a.m. Most towns held markets 2 or 3 times a week. Local farmers sold produce and animals. So produce is going to be like your vegetables, your fruit, things like that. And then we have this lovely illustration right here, and we see that the caption is "Town Scene in Medieval Manuscript." Let me make this a different way. There we go. Towns were not outside the control of the local lord. Merchants and craftsmen usually paid lords in the form of money or goods. However, in exchange for money or goods, many lords granted towns special charters. The charters allowed wealthy and influential townspeople the right to make their own laws. Over time, this new decision-making process changed the feudal system. With a growing economy, a banking system began to develop. The increasingly wealthy churches and towns created schools called universities. Places such as Oxford and Cambridge in England and Paris in France became important centers of learning. So we have 2 different things we got going here. We have charters such as this one from Bedford, England, outline certain rights. And then we have this down here that says construction on the chapel at Oxford University's Merton College began in the 1200s. Learn something new every day. It was not long before many European towns and cities became terribly overcrowded. People lived in small houses crowded together. So, before reading any further, if they are overcrowded and they're living in these teeny houses together, what can we guess is happening next? Germs, right? Grossness, spreading. The towns and cities were also disease-ridden. Rats scurrying about helped spread disease. Unless you lived in a castle, you did not have a toilet inside your home. Ugh. Instead, people used chamber pots and threw the contents into the streets. So that's saying that they went to the bathroom in like a pot, like almost what you cook with, and then they would just yeet it on into the street. And then those rats would walk through all that, and then the rats would spread, and it was just a mess. Local water supplies, polluted with the waste that was discarded daily, so that's referring back to the going to the bathroom in the pot and throwing it out, carried diseases. Sickness and disease were common. The Black Death spread easily in such conditions. As they did in the countryside, people in towns cooked on small fires inside their homes. Fires frequently broke out and were difficult to control. Townspeople were required to keep buckets of water outside their homes just in case. Could you imagine living like that? Like, You just have to keep water stored in buckets in case there's a fire. Crazy. Many middle-aged towns were walled. People entering or leaving did so through gates. Often a toll or fee was charged to enter a town. A toll collector stood at the gate to collect the fee. The tolls were either paid in money or in goods. Gates were designed to keep criminals out, or if necessary, to lock criminals in so that they could be caught. There was no organized police force, but instead there were watchmen. Any member of the public could be asked to help catch an escaping criminal. The town gates were locked at night when the curfew bell sounded. So we have a photo of a rat, and it says the rats spread disease in towns. And then it looks like we have another illustration here showing how quickly fires could spread. So that is some information about the Middle Ages. Make sure you finish up this Nearpod and learn lots. Bye!